Negative space can seem a bit challenging because of how clever it is. However, it's not too difficult for anyone. The underlying concepts behind negative space are quite simple. I say that the underlying concepts behind negative space are simple because you have two designs that overlap. One is in black, the other is in white. When the two designs overlap, they create a trick on the viewer's eye. We're going to try one together, and then we'll have more concrete understandings of how it works. Later, we'll get more creative with it. Right now, you'll find everything you need. The instructions, step by step, are on Canvas underneath Unit 3, Negative Space Drawing. I've switched screens to show you an example. Our example of it is of a T and H design. The H cuts into the T. So if you look closely, you'll see that there's an H and a T. This is a very simple example that shows you the concepts of negative space design while also giving you very easy, simple tools to work with. Again, we'll get more creative with our designs later, but right now let's follow along together. I'll walk you through this example and then we'll work a new one together. So I have my black letter T, my white letter H, and my background that has an extra little portion to it. So when I hide my background, you can see that I have an H and a T. Because the T wasn't long enough to fill in the missing portion of the H, we went ahead and we filled it in with a little rectangle that was black, and so that when it pieces together, the end of the T now meets the end of the H. We're now going to start a new document. We'll start with a blank US letter page. So we're going to go up to File, New. Our template is US letter, and we're going to keep it a portrait style orientation. So that's the one that's kind of longer than it is wide. We'll hit OK, and it gives us a new window automatically. So that we don't misplace this file, I'm going to save this file already in my, my digital design portfolio. And I'm going to call it my first initial, followed by my last name, underscore, TH. That'll be enough for me to remember that this is a TH positive and negative space design. This isn't going to be something that we will submit later on. This is just to teach us those concrete examples, but we still want to be able to find our file for later. So again, it should be named your first initial, followed by your last name, underscore TH, and then it will be an XCF document, and it gets stored in your digital design folder. Now that we have our new document, we also want to make sure that both our toolbox and our layers windows are open. If you're missing them, you'll need to go to Windows and bring those back up. If your background is black, you'll need to change that. So to change it, we're going to hit the new layer page, and you'll choose a white layer, and you can title it background. Then you would delete the one that was black now that you have your white page. We're going to start by first making a black letter T. So I'm going to grab my text tool. I'm going to draw a text box that's as big as my page, or roughly as big as my page. Over in my toolbox, I see that I have different options for fonts, and just for the sake of having an equal font that is of equal thickness, I'm going to scroll up to the top and find the Arial Heavy text font, and down in this size portion, I'm going to change my size to be 2000 pixels. Make sure it's at pixels. And my color will be black. I can also change the where the place that it sits on in this text box by choosing the justify, and I can center it by finding the box that says centered when I hover over it. Now there's not going to be a blinking arrow or anything that tells me that my text box is ready to be written in, but I'm going to just click the white space and write a capital T. It'll show up about the same size. Once I've made my black letter T and it's centered on my page, I will click the background. I'm going to hide it so that I have a transparent pixel background for now. I'm now going to click my text tool again because we're going to make a white letter H. Just as before, I'm going to go ahead and draw a text box that is as large as my workspace. This time, my color is going to be white. I'm going to keep the same size and font, so I don't need to change those, and I already have it set to justify, so we don't need to change that. Again, when I click the middle of my workspace, there won't be a blinking arrow, but I can go ahead and write a capital H. Now, right away you see that because I was working in my background, my letter H is kind of hidden behind my letter T. When I move my layer to the top of the T, it's taking a minute to load. I was able to get my T moved down. It took me a minute, and so if it does take you a minute, that's okay. You just kind of take your layer and you move it down so that your H is on top, your T is underneath, and then your white background layer, which is hidden, is on the very bottom. Right now my H is covering up the top part of my T. So I'm going to grab my move tool, move the H down, and I can use my arrow keys to help center that a little bit more in the space that it needs to fit. I'm left with an image where I have my T that peaks about halfway through the bottom portion of the H. The H rests just underneath the top part of the T, and it has equal portions next to the T. Now, because I'm still missing a little length here, whenever I add my background back to it, my T just looks like it's partly cut off. It doesn't really, you don't see the H very easily. So we need to make the lower portion of the H symmetrical to the top portion of the H. To solve this problem, I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle that just matches up with the very edge of the T in width, and it matches up with the length of the H. You may need to zoom in a little bit so that you can see what you're working with a little bit closer. You want that to match up evenly. If it cuts off too soon, it's going to look a little bit off. Now that I have my select box open to that area, I can drag my black over, or I can fill it with the foreground color. For some reason, this is not wanting to fill in for me. Obviously, it wasn't working in the right layer because I was trying to draw my box in this H. You can't draw in your text layer, so make sure you're working in your background layer. I'm going to drag that over there, and now it should work. It's not working. I kind of wonder if it's this screen capture tool that's causing all of these little delays. I'm going to press pause and try to figure it out and I'll come right back. Alright, so now that I've figured that out, I'm able to drag and drop this color into here. And there it is. Now I can right click and select none so that that dotted moving line moves away. And when I zoom back out, I'm able to see that my T and my H match up. Make sure you click Save so that everything is stored in your locker. And then if you need to go back and repeat portions, you can. But hopefully this gave you a more concrete understanding of how you take one black shape and one white shape. And by overlapping them, you're able to create a trick on the viewer's eye to show negative space cut out.